Good morning, everyone, and welcome for another live video AMA. My name is Amandine Flachs, and today I am joined by James Frewin, the designer, amazing person first, but also a freelance designer and a creative producer working with startups for many years. He's also a venture scout with Backed VC, so we've known each other for quite some time since I joined the Backed community. But before we get started and start ask our question to James, I would like to introduce the stream to you and let you know that you can all interact with us, ask us any questions anytime. So please feel free to jump into the chat, whatever the platform you're using. We seem to have some trouble with Periscope today, so you may not be able to interact through Twitter directly, but you can ask us anything, anytime on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and well, that's about it, but that's already a lot. So feel free to come say hi, let us know about what you do, and ask your question for James. I'm going to make sure I'll pass them on straight away. Also, for some reason, if you have to leave or if you want to share the video afterward, it is going to be available on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Amandine Flachs on Monday. So I'm going to do some work on it over the weekend, make sure to have a nice thumbnail and everything ready for it to be live on Monday afternoon. But that's it for all the housekeeping. I would like to introduce you to James. And James, I am super happy to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's good to be on here.
I am super excited because we've been chatting for quite some time and we've met over Backed VC events over the past, but we haven't really had the time to sit down and have a real catch up. So I'm so happy we have the time to do it right now. First thing first, can you introduce yourself, tell more about what you do, a bit of your background, and what you're up to today?
Yeah, of course. So as Amandine said, my name's James. I'm a designer. Is most of what I do. I work freelance, and most of my clients are tech startups, tech companies, things like that. And then more recently, also working with artists in the music industry, and just kind of helping them with design or even social media strategy, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So my background is again mostly in design, but in a whole range of startups, larger corporate companies, and then also some agencies, and then even in pharmaceuticals before that as well.
Wow, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So I think during the stream we may be talking about different aspects of design. So just to get it right in terms of terminology, can we just start by maybe differentiating what we call design, branding, UX? I think we can find a bit of all those different words on your website, and if we look a bit further into design for startups, but it may not be clear for everyone. So I guess those words are going to pop up at some point.
Yeah.
So let's get them straight first.
So most of what I do is UI design or like interface design, which is generally is apps is my like kind of specialty. So that's all of like how the visuals of the app look, and then more on like the UX side, how it actually works, how it functions, that kind of stuff, which is equally as important, although maybe not as fun. And then I also do like some branding work, which obviously is branding. And that's pretty separate to like graphic design and posters and things like that, which I generally don't touch because I actually kind of suck at them. So I stick to app design and UI design, that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you've worked in pharmaceutical before, and design is something you can apply to any kind of company, any size, but you decided to work a lot with startups. So what made you kind of fall in love with this way of working? Because it's not the same thing working with big companies and have a real brief, or working with early stage startups.
So working with pharmaceuticals was super interesting. It was like something that I hadn't experienced at all before, and I got into it through working at an agency while I was at university. One of the really hard parts about working in pharmaceuticals as a designer is that there's so many regulations, so much kind of like red tape around any kind of work at all, whether it's like messaging or what you show. And so you could create something that looks amazing, like Spotify or Airbnb level like quality, but by the time it comes out, it will look like something that was made like 7-8 years ago. which is obviously super frustrating as a designer. And there's so many things that like it has to go through so many like regulations and things like that. That by the end, I was just like, it was frustrating that you can't almost do your best work. I think it's changing a bit now, but definitely back in like 2013, 14, that kind of time, you couldn't. Whereas when I was at university and I would like do small jobs for startups or go and do like random projects with them, and then after uni as well, it was just a completely different way of working. It was much more kind of like hands-on. You didn't have to ask a lot of questions. You just kind of needed to do the work, which really suited me. And I liked having the flexibility to be able to know that there was a problem with marketing and somebody needs to work out what that problem is. So it was there for me to try and do it. And so that's how I moved into marketing as well. That's how I also moved into community stuff, or even like events, sales, like pitching, that kind of stuff. Just through like finding that there was like a need for it. So it definitely, I feel like I learned so much more, so much faster by working in small companies. And that's kind of why I stuck around with it.
I completely agree. I mean, you have the flexibility and you have to have so many hats when you're working with startups. At the end, you need to get things done. They don't have the time to create a brief and wait for many approval. Things need to go fast and straight away, like right now. So what are the stage of the startup you usually work with? And how early do you think founders need to seek external help for their design and brand? Is there a sweet spot, a moment? Because let's be honest, when you're a founder, you have the tendency to to minimize the cost and also to do everything yourself first. And so I'm sure there are so many stories about people designing their own logo on Paint. And I have to say, I'm guilty. Our logo, it was my co-founder and I just on during an evening thinking, okay, we need to have a logo to send to some company or to someone. And then, we need to do it right now. So let's just create something. We don't have the tool, we don't have the right experience, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what, that's a really good question. So so the first question, so like the companies I work with can be pretty much any stage. Like sometimes I work with companies where it's literally like one or two people just starting something out and they want sometimes it's even just they've got an app idea and they want to be able to show that to people, or show it to developers, or show it to investors and stuff. And so all they want is a few app screens like mocked up. And so at that point, I can give them something that looks really real and it looks like a finished product, and it helps them get their vision across. So that's one stage. Aside from that, I also work with bigger startups where they've actually got investment at that point and they're looking to scale up, or they've let's say they've already got a version of their app, and it's one that maybe they did do themselves, or they kind of put together with what they had at the start, but they want to do something that kind of like takes them to like another level. So then I work with them at that stage. But then also I work with some bigger clients, people like Unilever or like LinkedIn, and that's like it's a completely different style of company to work in, where my design is one tiny part of like a huge massive company anyway, but it's what they need at the time. So yeah, it definitely varies. And then your second question about which point should people think about design? Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I'm biased, right? Like I obviously love design. I would say, yeah, day one. Obviously, that's the most important thing. It is to me when I'm working on projects. Like I always I spend so much time at the start looking at this kind of stuff and obsessing over it. But I do think it's valuable for anyone to think about at any point, because I think it's design is a really interesting thing where it can give you that impression of looking like a massive company, even if you're not. And so even if you take a tiny company, and you see it a lot with rebrands as well. I see it like, especially in London, there's a lot of like startups that get rebrands, and there's some amazing agencies that do them as well. And straight away you see the rebrand and you feel like, okay, now this is like a real company, and now this is a real thing. And it's that same thing as well, right? Like if you've got like an app or a branding, anything that gives that kind of experience or that feel that it's been really well considered and really thought out, that same feeling applies. Then people shooting that to your work, to who you are, what you do. And I think design is almost like it's the first thing that people see.
Yeah.
And so as long as the design is good, you're at least getting them over that first hurdle, which is sometimes what you need, especially if your product is really good anyway. Um, yeah, it's definitely a weird one though. I always say like straight away, day one.
Yeah, I agree. I wish we had spent some time on that before. Um, so we haven't yet. We haven't asked anyone outside. Like I ask you for your feedback on a few things, but we haven't really. I try to be the one that keep the brand consistent, but even if we haven't started communicated officially yet. But anyway, yes, it is. It is also, I think, good to have someone that is not necessarily the founders who are doing everything at the same time, but someone who is kind of responsible for making sure that there is consistency between the different assets. You say the same thing. You have the same. You are vehiculating the same image and the same messages, not just in terms of words, but visually and across all the different medium.
Yeah, totally. I think what you said about like different stages of companies is really interesting as well, though, because like if you're a brand new company and let's say you've got for everything, your product, your branding, your marketing, everything, you've got a budget of £10,000. I wouldn't say go out and spend £10,000 on a rebrand because you need to actually be rebranding something, right?
Mm.
So there's that part, and I do think like you can get a lot done with people at different levels and just like getting the bare minimum of what you need, like a logo maybe and some other bits and pieces, and then as you grow up you can keep getting more. But also like I think there's so many good tools nowadays for anyone really to be able to touch design. Things like Canva are like they're so good and they've made design so much more accessible to people, which is awesome. Like even though it's kind of taken my job, I think it's like so good because it's given people that flexibility to be able to
Yes.
create stuff that looks really nice. And I think that's the goal as a designer at the end of the day is more things looking nice in the world.
Is there any other tool that you are using a lot, you as a designer, or any tool that people should know about? Either designers or not designers. Is there any specific tools to know apart from
Yeah,
Canva?
yeah, absolutely. There's a few. So the big one that I'm like obsessed with is Figma.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
yeah, you've probably seen it. Like, I've probably talked to you about it before or something. It's mostly aimed at like app design and UI design, that kind of stuff. But like you can use it for pretty much anything. I do illustrations in there. I do pitch decks in there. Pretty much whatever. But it's essentially works like Google Docs, and it's perfect for what I need because I've got a laptop with like a tiny hard drive on it, and so I do all my work in the cloud anyway. And I seem to be able to break my MacBook so quickly. I have to constantly change, and so my work living in the cloud is perfect for me. So there's that. I also actually do quite a lot on my phone, surprisingly. Like I'm trying to do more and more work on my phone and less work on my laptop. And there's a couple of apps I use. One called InShot, which is for video editing. That one's awesome. Love that one. And then there's another one called Over. I think it's on Android too, but it's called Over, and it's like a little yellow circle is the icon, and I use that for tons of different stuff. I use that for loads, especially like social media content, Instagram stories and things like that. It's great.
Kane on LinkedIn asks the spelling of that. So it's not dogma, it's Figma for the first one. So
Yeah,
F-I...
Figma.
Yes.
Yeah, go to figma.com and have a look at that. It's free as well, which is added bonus.
Yeah, I've been diving into this recently, and when I discovered it, like I heard about it for a long time, but I started using it just a couple of weeks ago, and I spent a few days on it, and I was like amazed. I found it so easy to do something that is good looking without having the skills to do something
Yeah.
that looks good.
Yeah, I'm a big fanboy. I can almost hear my flatmate in the other room rolling his eyes at the moment at me saying that.
We also have another question from Luke. Hi, Luke. Good to see you here today. Luke asks, if you want to work with big companies, should you look like one?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's benefits from it for sure. So, for example, having no work in a portfolio or no work in a website, like looking like you're just starting, I think that can definitely be a turn off for like big companies, especially when there's like there's a lot of money or a lot of kind of it's like a large project on the line, and they need to go for someone who they can trust. And sometimes that doesn't have to be someone that they've already worked with before. Sometimes it is a new person because they like your style or whatever it is. And so all you really need to get across is that you're trustworthy or good enough to do the job. So that's one like really interesting part of it. I think I wouldn't say like lie and say like post on your website and say, oh, we're a company that employs like 1,000 people, whatever, because like that stuff is, I mean, one, it's easily checkable, right, and they can find out, and two, it's like that's not the best way to be doing stuff. But I think like treating your work as like the same quality of like bigger companies is definitely how you should do it, and even to an extent, I think that kind of reflects in the language and the messaging you use and stuff. I think the stuff that you send over, proposals and things like that, should still be well done, so it feels like it is coming from some like a company that has more people or is like a bigger size. And I think that's totally achievable now. Saying like, following on from what we just said, with some of these tools, like you can get like good proposals, you can get good invoicing templates and stuff like that now. I'm such like a freak that I design all of my invoices and my pricing stuff, so it's like fully on brand.
Wow.
Because like, yeah, I know, because I'm just like a bit of a loser like that, but I think like putting that kind of work into stuff, it just kind of adds to the whole feel, and I think doing that kind of stuff helps you get kind of seen by these companies.
Yeah. I would also add that it can help you just get the feet in the door. So it's not about lying, but it's about maybe opening a door. So
Yeah,
potentially,
totally.
if you just send an email, or if your website looks crappy, and well, people you want to talk to just look at this and they have no other way to get to know you, and they have some doubt, you want just to create some kind of confidence that you can have a meeting, and then you have to do the job to convince them. But
Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah,
about
yeah,
getting
totally.
this first meeting.
I think one thing that I found that's always been like kind of, I mean, a couple of things. One is that like I've always found that like the companies that I want to work with, or the people that I want to work with, generally seem to have found me earlier than I've expected them to, which has been good. And I think if you're just constantly trying to put like good stuff out and show your work and like show it to people, which can be like difficult sometimes, especially design. I still hate getting feedback on my work. I'll send it to people, and then they'll give me feedback on it and be like, "You should change this," and I'll be like, "Oh, fuck, I don't want to touch it anymore at all." Um, I think like if you can put stuff out, I think those companies find you a lot sooner than you expect them to, which is always like kind of interesting.
I completely agree. I actually have a questions when it comes to the process. So you recently shared your work on Twitter and also the platform, the work you've done with the Trimit app, which is a mobile barbershop. And it looks really good. Like when I saw that, I was like, that looks amazing. That looks really neat, really clean. Can you walk us through the process when you start diving into the company, when you ask the question, what are the key questions you really need to have, or the answer you need to have when you start talking to a startup like that needs an app? What was the stage? What did they have before you joined? What did you do really? Did they have a clear journey for the user experience, or did you also brought that? Did you work with them, or did you execute their initial idea?
Yeah, great question. And I'm a huge Trimit fan. I got my hair cut by Trimit again yesterday. You probably saw on my Twitter. Definitely go and check them out if you're watching. After this, obviously, not right now. Um, so yeah, awesome question. Um, so the process, like, it changes based on like how much time people have got. A lot of the time, my clients come to me and everything is super urgent, and they're like, "Okay, we need that designed by the end of next week, or we need a pitch deck done by tomorrow." Those ones they're definitely tougher. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'd much rather have more time and be able to deliver early than the other way around. Trimit was a really good example. And if anyone hasn't seen the Trimit design, you can see it on my Instagram or on my Twitter. Just go and have a look around. Um, so theirs was a really good example where they already had an existing app. it was like a little bit basic, and they just wanted to take it to the next level as they were like growing and kind of expanding. So I had something to work from, which was nice already, because I could then identify problems in the flow or problems in the design anyway that I could fix really easily. And I think that's actually, as a designer, I think I personally enjoy that a little bit more, where I've got something to work from. But what I did was I sat down with them. I had lunch with the founder, Darren, and we just talked about companies that he really liked, where he wanted Trimit to go in the future, apps that he was using that he found were really interesting, because it's very helpful for me to get like people's style, and even if it's not the specific style that they know that they like, by using examples of apps that they already like, subconsciously you can kind of get that across, which is really interesting. And I've got a couple of like fairly distinct styles that I use, and so generally people come to me for those styles, but if I can actually hear from someone straight, like from their mouth, like what they like and what they're after, that helps a lot. Then with Trimit, I went out and I put together a huge mood board of tons of different app examples, features, even like tiny little design choices that certain apps use, screenshots and stuff, and annotated it all with why I think it was relevant to them, where I think it would work in their context, all this kind of stuff, and brought this big mood board together. And that's kind of the first step. Following that, I always like to put together like a little page, which I generally call like a playground, and it's just for me to just throw loads of random ideas in and just mess around with stuff. So that's always fun. And I also generally give my clients like full access to the Figma file as well, so they can log in, they can see while I'm working, see all the different stuff I'm doing. And while I'm in there, I'm generally testing out colors, different layouts, and this kind of stuff, and eventually I'll come across one which I feel like works. Then I start building out more of like a flow, and either I've already got a flow from them, a set of wireframes, or like a user journey in itself. But it's generally that plus some extra. I don't know if you saw in the breakdown of Trimit, when I first spoke to Darren, he said, "Oh, don't worry, it's only going to be 10 screens to design," and then by the end it was 124. And so yeah, so there's always like, I always assume that there's going to be extra and try and account for that as well, especially when I'm giving time estimates and things like that. But then I'll basically go through, I'll make sure I've got each page in the flow laid out so I can see roughly where it's going to go. And then I'll start with the kind of, I might as well just say like ingredients. It's almost like an ingredient, right? Or an element that is going to be there throughout the whole app. So navigation bars or things like that. Once I've got those bits in there, then I can start tweaking the actual, like the individual parts for each page. And then by the end, I hope I've got a flow that I can hand straight over to the developers, which has got everything in the right order, it looks right, the right colors, all that kind of stuff. And occasionally, for Trimit's example, they had a load of different, almost like cards that would change based on what was happening in the app. And I put together like a library of these kind of like card elements, which you also saw in the breakdown, I guess. But sometimes there'll be a page for brand elements, sometimes there'll be a page for icons, tons of different stuff. But that's most of the process really. And then if people have got no time, then that gets accelerated massively, and stages get missed out. So that's mostly how the process works.
That's fantastic. I love how you just break down the entire process, because I think for lots of people it can be a bit obscure to understand how you start working with a designer, especially when you're an early stage startup. Having anyone from outside of the company joining you for a project, it's always, well, lots of questions. You don't really know how this is going to work and how you need to plan for that. So I really love how you break everything and explain that. And actually it really pushes me and it makes me want to start working on our design really soon and working on the platform itself and the website and the next version and everything.
Yeah.
But everything has its own time. Anyway, so you've worked with lots of different startups on different projects. Is there any mistakes that you've seen startups do when it comes to their initial brand or design? You talk a lot about the fact that in London we see lots of startup rebranding. So I guess there may have been lots of mistakes when you jump in and you're like, someone asks, okay, we need to rebrand now. Here's what we have, and you may be horrified by some of the things you see.
I thought when you started that question, I thought you were going to say, "Is there any mistakes that I've made?" I was going to
Oh,
say, "Yeah, how have you got?" Um, but yeah, you're right. So there's always like things that that could be helpful on this process. The classic one is that I get all the time, and my family. I don't know if they're watching this, but my family, my friends, they hear me complain about this so often. Is is about pitch decks and like how long people give me to design those, because I love doing them, and I love doing a great like a good job on them, because it's something that like I love doing pitch deck design, and I've done that for like for years now, since 2012 2013. um, but it's something that can be really valuable to a company, and if it's the like the main kind of vessel for giving their message to an investor about what they do, then that's a really valuable part of their whole business process, right? Um, but I see so many founders that leave that right to the last moment, and they say like, we need a pitch deck in tomorrow, or we need it by the end of the week, and it would be like Wednesday already, something like that. And it's like I can do it by that time, but I would love to be able to give you something that really made a difference to the company and showed you off in the best way. And so I honestly like, I think the number one message that I think I would give to those kind of companies is like, even if you think it's only going to take a week, just give the designer 2 weeks, or just give them 3 weeks, whatever, because it will reflect better on you in the end. Like the work will come out better. And also like, as just speaking from like a money basis, um, I can charge less if I've got more time to do it. If I have to do it in a day, then it's going to take me 24 hours of like working like a freak. Then I'll have to bump the price up, because I otherwise I won't sleep or eat. And so it will be cheaper for them, and they'll get better work in return. Um, so that's the main one. I think other mistakes. I don't know if there's so much mistakes. I think it's like, it's again just people doing stuff at different stages. Like a brand that someone does themselves as the founder, as long as it serves the purpose, I don't think it's a mistake. I think like it's good for people to do that kind of stuff, especially if you're not a designer. To have a go at it yourself, I think gives you a lot of kind of clarity on why a designer is important, and also why design as a whole is important to the business. And I think it also gives you the ability to talk to designers better and actually get your opinion and what you want across. And then I think when you do bring a designer on, I think being able to see the difference between the two, I think also kind of solidifies that for people. So that's one. I don't think there's I don't know if there's many I mean, everyone makes like millions of mistakes in startups, right? But that's part of the reason people do it, I guess. I hope that answers the question though.
definitely. And I feel so guilty when you're talking about founders that do the deck really quickly. I had to do a few weeks ago a deck, not really like an investor deck, but a deck for a competition, and I had a week to do it. And we had nothing, no slides at all, and so I had to do everything from scratch. It was a fantastic exercise because you have to think about what you put in there. But in terms of design, I don't know. I did what I could, and that's okay. But yeah, I feel so guilty about that. So I completely get the founder's perspective, but you're right. You're completely right. Is there anything that you wish that startup knew or did before they reach out to you or to anyone, to an external designer? And anything that really helps the process? Maybe thinking about what the brand is in terms of the image and the type of tones you want to have, maybe.
Yeah, totally. So, like I mentioned earlier, having an idea of where you want the brand to go in the future, or where you want the company to go in the future, that's a really good one. I love getting that kind of insight from people, and asking people about what products or what brands they really love is always a really good way to get it, because you literally see them get so hyped up about the same. Like when I talk about Figma to people, and I get so hyped up about it, like that's what I want people to say about another brand, and that's what I want them eventually to say about their own brand. I want them to be that hyped up about it, right? And you can only really get that by delivering like exactly what's in their head, but it's almost impossible to get out what's in their head, because like for someone who's not a designer to translate a design vision in their head to me is pretty difficult, because they might not know the way to say it. It's like when I'm speaking with developers and I have no idea how to speak to them. I just show them something nice and say, please make this. Um, and so I don't know. I think it's definitely strange. Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm not really sure
No,
on that
that's
one.
fine. That's completely fine. Um, Kane asks if you ever worked on any branding for DeFi blockchain startups. Interesting. Kane, are you interested
Um,
in hiring gems?
yeah, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. Hey Kane, I haven't, not much actually. Anyway, I always kind of stayed away from like crypto and blockchain because I didn't really fully understand it, and it felt like I was going to lose all my money if I did it at the start. But I'm always interested in doing brand work or design for different companies. I think that's one of the best parts of the job is doing different stuff. Um, so yeah, I definitely interested in doing it. But I haven't yet. I can't say I've got much experience in blockchain stuff. You might have to teach me some of the words around it.
I did. I worked with a blockchain startup for quite some time, and we had a designer in house, and yeah, it was very interesting to work with him. It was very specific, and so there were lots of conflicts sometimes between design and marketing. When you have designer who have a very clear vision of what it should look like, and when you are in the marketing side and you actually just need assets right now, like not in 3 days, but today in an hour. So it's
It's interesting you said that. So you actually just gave me a good answer for your previous question. So one of the things that I think companies really should do is rather than having, if you've got your main landing page, and this is almost like veering into like marketing rather than design as well. If you've got like your main website that people go to, and you've also got a product that people are building, like your engineers are building, and that's kind of what your main business is. Let's talk about SaaS business as an example. So you've got some software that you're building, and then you've got a website that does it. I think making or getting your developers to build that website, I think causes a lot more problems down the line. I think the best way to do it is to have a marketer and a designer work on it together. There's so many good tools now for building websites like this, and having them be able to really quickly iterate on it, make changes, have the marketer look at it, look what can be improved, and then have the designer make the changes using something like WordPress or even Squarespace to an extent as well, rather than having it to take time away from the product for the engineers. I think makes a big difference. Otherwise, you're always playing catch up with the stuff where you tweak something, but you've got to wait a week or 2 weeks for the developers to have time. So that's something that I would always say is a really good way to do it. There's a tool that I use for building these sites, which is a WordPress plugin called Semplice, semplice.com. And that's a really good one for doing that kind of stuff. That's one that I always kind of recommend. But I think pulling that away from developers, I think makes a big difference, just in speed anyway.
I completely agree, yes. Being right now in the middle of this process, I did the website on my own, and I didn't want to take the time off my co-founder who is working on the AI part, because that is key. I mean, the core tech is going to take priority on the website, and I didn't want to wait for him, to have a few minutes here and there. So that is a very good advice. I also spotted on your website that you have a downloadable cheat sheet for social media and content strategy. And so I understand that you don't just work on the visual aspect. And actually, I think it actually raised some questions about branding consistency. So it's not just about the design and what the website looks like, but it's also a continuous work in terms of keeping this brand consistency across your channel and across every content you create, even if it's a blog post or any other medium. Do you have any tips for that? Any advice on staying on brand?
So I think the easiest advice to kind of like to go off is just kind of like do stuff as you are. So I think one of the reasons that I've had like maybe quite good like experiences doing this stuff with brands or companies or whatever is because when they deal with me, whether it's by email or whether it's in person or by email, whatever it is. Even social media, they know that they're talking to me, and that's just because like I've got a fairly open way of talking. Like I tweet the same way that I speak. I write emails the same way that I speak. My cheat sheet thing is written in the same way that I speak as well. And I think that kind of adds almost to a little bit of like personality or even like authenticity possibly as well. And so I think that's the easiest way because it's the easiest one to control, especially if it's just you working on something. And obviously as a freelancer, it's just me working on this stuff. So it's easy for me to write something because I just write what's in my head as if I'm texting my friends. And it's not like I have to think like, oh, what's the voice of my work, that kind of thing, which then just adds to time and adds to like what would be the design style for this voice, right? Whereas if I'm making jokes and stuff and being stupid, then I can put emojis, and I can put random gifs or jokes, whatever it is, in my emails, and hopefully for the most part, like clients won't think I'm insane because they're already aware of it. That's the idea anyway. So that's also easy for me to say as like a freelancer. If you're a brand and you've got a bunch of people to kind of like to all have this central business or the central like voice, it can be harder for sure. And I think one good way that I got taught from someone at Google for Startups said that for all of Google's products, they have this voice or this like character, but to make it easier for people to understand, they use like a famous person that people understand, because it makes it easier for everyone to know what that voice is. So for one of their products across all social or whatever it is, the voice might be Jennifer Lawrence, for example, and then if you're looking at writing a message or whatever, you can just think like, does this sound like something that Jennifer Lawrence would say? If it does, then great, then post it. But if it's not, whereas if you say like, and I see a lot of like persona stuff that people do in companies, and I never do it because it feels too boring to me, to be completely honest. But people will say like, okay, we've got this guy, he's like 50-year-old called Barry, and he like lives in this place and he's got this job. But everyone's got different like conceptions of who that person is. Like they might know someone called Barry or their dad's called Barry and they've fallen out over something and now they're like arguing, and people have got different ideas. Where if it's someone public, I think it's actually a really good way to kind of narrow it down. On the design side, I think trying to find a style that you like makes a big difference. And then if it's things like if you find an icon library that you like, try and stick with that through everything. If you find a color palette you like, I really like kind of this like bluey purpley color, so I use that in a lot of my stuff, and I think that's one part of it. I guess the other part is trying to make stuff look different, and so I think that helps a lot as well as helping you stand out. When I talked about my invoices and stuff, rather than just sending like a white page with black text on it, I do it like the opposite way. So the background is all a color and then the text is all white on it. And it just feels like it was designed by me, which I think it just kind of helps pull everything together more cohesively. But look, it's something that always is hard to do, especially as like trends change and you want to keep evolving it, but you also want to stay on brand to what you've had before. Like I change my stuff all the time, but like I try and do as best I can anyway to keep it there. And that's me, like, and I literally obsess over this stuff.
We have on the chat Fajar, who say hi, and he's from Singapore. So hi, Fajar.
Great, hey, brother.
He was actually on the stream a couple of weeks ago, so good to see him here. Fajar asks, how did you design your portfolio?
Oh man, good question. I think designers' portfolios are always like such a funny topic because I don't know a single designer that actually like enjoys making a portfolio. And I even like now, I don't even have like a really good one that I send people. I'm literally, you know, I'm trying to do one right now. If you go to jamesfrewin.com, you can see my work in progress one. There's literally 2 things on there. Normally what I do is, and this is definitely not good advice, don't get me wrong. Normally when someone says, have you got a portfolio? I just send them tons of links. And that's one of the reasons I put a load of my work on Twitter, actually, is that I think designing in public kind of makes up for not having a portfolio. And so I'll quite often post my work on Twitter rather than post it on a design website like dribble.com, for a couple of reasons. One, when people go to Dribble, I'm one designer out of like 1 million that they're looking at. Whereas on Twitter, if I'm the only designer that people follow, or I'm the only person tweeting app designs, then when someone needs an app design, it's easier for them to come straight to me. But also, like I mentioned, if I can just send people to my Twitter profile, that's so much easier to me than trying to send them to this portfolio. I've broken down case studies and stuff like that. I'd much rather do a series of tweets like I did with Trim It, where I break it down, I talk about it and explain it. But then there's stuff in my bio that says what I do. There's also other tweets where I'm just making jokes or annoying my friends, etc. And when people want to go there, they actually get like a full picture of who I am, rather than this like portfolio I'm trying to claim I'm like this like philosophical designer who like spends months thinking about like rounded corners of buttons, which is also probably true.
Fajar seems to agree.
I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. He says, design in public, this is very good tips and advice, thanks. So I think it definitely answers your question. That actually leads me to another question. We covered many topics already, I know, but we've been talking about startups, brands, and organizations, brands, but you mentioned your own social media, your own Twitter. You also mentioned doing content creation on mobile and everything. And I know you are super active on Instagram. I'm not great on Instagram, but you are doing such a great job, always active, always doing something. Do you have any tips for founders and their personal brand? Because there is a brand of the company, yes, but also as a founder, you want to stand out, you want to have your own identity. And sometimes if you're not already active, or if you're just too busy running your company and trying to grow your business, you may not spend time on your own personal brand. So any quick tips to improve your personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super valuable, and I still kind of hate the term personal brand, because I think people just assume it's like you're trying to make yourself out as this like registered trademark kind of thing. But I think it's super valuable, and I honestly I think I'm really fortunate that I started putting work into it like when I did, which was like 2012, 2013, because it definitely is a compounding thing, and you get benefits over time. Absolutely. Some of the tips that I think are super valuable, like I mentioned earlier, write in your normal voice. I think that's a huge one. I'm constantly tweaking this and changing it. Some of my Instagram captions are properly written like a normal human would write. Sometimes it's like me just writing random stuff. I'm constantly like tweaking, but for the most part, I try and write exactly as I talk, or exactly as I think. And I genuinely think that makes a big difference. I think the other part is really just trying to get your personality across. Like, talk about the stuff that interests you, joke about the stuff that is funny to you, within reason. I think honestly, doing stuff in public is like a really good way to do it.
Yes.
And I've just, although it looks like I maybe know what I'm doing, I've just been doing it for like long enough that it's compounded enough to be like at a place where it's good. I think you get the added benefit of like quite often people or companies want to work with you because it's you rather than your skill set, and I think that's a really like key message behind personal brand stuff. So the easiest example for me to give as a designer is like is talking about personal style, which I said earlier. So if I've got a really unique style of app design, let's say, let's kind of attribute that to like essentially the equivalent of like personal brand. So that is my style on my personal brand. If a company wants to use that style, then they're hiring me to do that style for them, rather than hiring me just because I know how to use Sketch or use Figma or Photoshop, that kind of thing. So they're not just hiring a designer, because that means they could choose anyone. But if they want that specific style, or in the terms of like personal brand, if they want to work with you, they can't really afford to go somewhere else because they're not getting what they want. I don't know how many people actually want to work with me. Hopefully it's lots, but but that's like the theory, right? Is like people want to work with you, and the only way they know they want to work with you is because they've seen you, and you seem like real to them, almost like the stuff that you're tweeting and you're posting about, and when you're at events, whatever, like all of that stuff is you. And if people like you enough, then hopefully they want to work with you. That's like the goal, right? So I think that's those are honestly the main ones. That's pretty much all there is to it. I think that's all I really do to it. But then the other big part, which I think is really useful, or at least a couple of parts, is I try and give a lot of like educational stuff away for free, like my cheat sheet, for example. It's like a bunch of kind of exercises and things that I did with my clients, and I came up with them when I was doing these jobs in startups, and I was moving more into marketing or content creation, that kind of stuff. And I would get asked these questions all the time, like what's a good way to build like a content strategy, or what's a good way to design content on mobile. And I would answer these questions so much that I was like, well, I might as well just build a cheat sheet for it and just give it to these people. And then if I'm giving it to people, I might as well just give it for free to everyone online. And then people get it, and then they get the value from it. And if you're giving value to people without asking for anything in return, it's not like, okay, all right, now I'm charging for this like cheat sheet, but I was giving it away for free, like an earlier version. Like if you're giving stuff away for free constantly, I think you'll get the benefits back from it later on anyway. So I think that's a big one for sure. And then the other one I think is just like is being open to like offer help to people as well for doing things. I think it's like ingrained in me now from having like a job in customer service like way back, but I'm a bit like obsessive with like help, like answering questions for people. So if I see people on Twitter just asking questions about stuff, I'll jump in and like advice, or if like even so back to VC as an example, one of their portfolio companies was hiring a designer, and he wanted to look through portfolios, but he's not a designer himself. So I just reviewed all the portfolios for him and told him which one was the best. And I think doing that kind of stuff, which is like is not your day-to-day job or your main role, but actually helps people do their job, I think is a big part of it as well.
I think it's always good exercises to do something slightly different. It's a bit like when you when I go judge a pitching event. I may not be the biggest and the best expert for that, but it's always a very challenging exercise that makes you think about some industries, some topics, some stuff, and you always gain something from that. We actually have an interesting question from Fajar asking if you buy asset or use free asset to work faster and custom it. So if you use asset templates.
Yeah, awesome question. I totally buy assets. There's a ton of like really amazing websites for doing it. I mentioned that I specialize in like app design and UI design. Anything outside of that, I won't bother doing it myself because it just takes too long. So I constantly buy stuff. There's some awesome websites for doing it. If you go onto my Twitter, and I did a big breakdown recently on like creating content during a pandemic. There's a whole thread in there, and I list a bunch of websites that are really good. But I'll constantly buy stuff. I buy fonts all the time. I'm a bit of like a loser for buying fonts. And also even just yesterday, like I'm working with a client right now, we were going to have some illustrations on there on their app design, and I said to them like, we can use some icons, I can try and mock up some illustrations, or I found this really nice pack of like 3D assets which fit perfectly with what their kind of business is. So I said to them like, we can just use these, and then they've got them for their website and stuff as well. So yeah, I totally buy stuff, and it definitely saves time as well. I'll also even just like sometimes if I've got to design like a poster or something for something that I'm doing, if I've got a friend who's better at graphic design, I'll just give it to them and just pay them to do it instead, because I just suck at it. I'd much rather just pay someone who's actually like a professional. That's what I'm asking people to do with me, right? So I might do it with other people.
That totally makes sense. Okay, so we covered many things, many topics today, and we are reaching the end of this interview. If anyone has any final questions, please make sure to add it right now in the chat. That's super interesting, and we had so many tips. I tried to write it down, and I definitely need to rewatch and re-listen to everything, because you mentioned so many different aspects. It's super inspiring. I actually want to do design stuff now for this afternoon. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned, or any question you wish me to ask you, or anything that you wanted to add to the discussion?
Maybe one thing so I think like another tip that I would like to add for whether it's designers or anyone really, I think it's like it can benefit from this stuff. I think being like having almost like an early adopter mindset for stuff, or like getting into stuff early, it makes a big difference to people. or even like into the stuff that you do. So I'll use the example of like Instagram filters and AR work. I got into it just because I was messing around one weekend when I saw the feature like was being released. But because I got into it really early and started messing around with it, on the off chance that it might actually become good, then later on when it did get a lot bigger, it was another skill that I could then go and like charge clients for or look for work for as well. So even if there's less design work, I can go and do that as well. And so I think picking up these like random skills on the off chance that they might be useful are always good. So being kind of like quite curious is a good one. Another tip is, I think, like cold messaging people or like cold emailing people. I think people are way more open to helping than people normally assume they will be. I try and reply to most like cold emails and messages I get because I've been in that position as well before. And I think doing that and writing like a nice email or a nice message to someone, I think you'll get like a good response for whatever you're asking for. That's another one. And then the other one I think is trying to prepare for things that will probably never happen. And the things almost always seem to happen anyway. The amount of like random things that have happened like in my career where it's been super lucky that I did something like 2 years back or that I was preparing for something from way back so that I was ready for this moment, and stuff like that happens like all the time. So I think even if you think there's no actual benefit that you'll get immediately from something, like doing it and learning a new skill or building something that you don't have any future for, but it's a good experience, that kind of stuff, can end up being really valuable later on. So I think whatever you do is like, if you're like curious enough, you'll get like a benefit out of it later on.
So final question from Fajar, who asked if you think GPT-3 will help designers in the future.
Oh, that is a good question.
Well, I guess GPT-3 or AI in general.
Yeah, super interesting. I've been watching a lot of I saw like a really cool thing on GPT-3 where someone was basically just describing a web design to them and then it was just generating it for them in Figma. I thought that was cool. I was a little bit scared by it, but I think no, I'm joking. I think it will help designers for sure. I'm not entirely sure how, but I think even if it's just that it basically democratizes access to design even more, and makes more people able to create stuff, I think that alone it will be awesome. I don't think there can be like too many designers. I think there should be more. Everyone should be a designer. And if GPT-3 and AI lets that happen, then I'm all for it.
I actually think that all the tools that help anyone to become a designer, it actually pushes people to start doing things on their own, and then really quickly you realize that you reach the limit of what you can do on your own, and you need help because you're stuck or you're doing something so crap that you need help.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, James. Where can people find you? You mentioned your website, and I'll make sure to put your website in the description. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way? Because you are also on so many channels, you're active in many places. So what's the best way to reach out?
Really? So my website is heyimjames.cool, or you can go to jamesfrewin.com. Either is fine. And I'm also, like you mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, Twitter. My name is normally just James Frewin or James Frewin1. But yeah, hit me up wherever. If you see that I'm on a website, I'm probably still online on it, so just send me a message there, and I'll probably get back to you. Also, you can just email me. My email is in most of my bios anyway.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to put all the links and also to put the links of all the resources we mentioned today. That's a lot, but hopefully I won't miss any. And it will be all in the video that will be available on my YouTube channel on Monday. Thank you so much, James. I'm going to stay on the stream. I'm going to have a 1-2 minutes break on the stream, and I'm going to come back to answer more questions, discuss about design and other stuff with the people on the stream. So stay around. I'll come back in 2 minutes. Time to refill some coffee or water. And we can chit chat for quite some time. James, pleasure to have you here today. I really loved our discussion, so thank you so much.
Nice one. Thanks everyone for watching as well and sending questions.
Have a great weekend ahead, and we'll be in touch soon. And I'm sure I'll get back to you soon for my own brand and design.
Yeah. Bye,
Speak
everyone.
soon, James. Bye.